Welcome to Season 4 of the Europol podcast, the official podcast of the EU Agency for Law Enforcement Cooperation. This season, we look at the emerging threats and key developments in the field of cybercrime. Episode 1: How cybercrime enablers are facilitating crime. In this episode, we look at one of the forces shaping modern cybercrime: services, tools, infrastructure that allow criminals to operate at scale. To understand how this works, I speak with Edvardas, Šileris, head of Europol's European Cybercrime Center, and Marijn, Schuurbiers, head of unit at Europol. Together, they explain how cybercrime enablers are changing the threat landscape, why they matter for investigations, and what they tell us about the future of organized crime online. Our conversation was recorded during a Europol Live Expert session. Because the live Q&A already took place, it is no longer possible to ask questions. Take a listen. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. My name is Carlota. I'm your moderator today. Today is our first live expert session. We're delighted to have you here with us. This is going to be a highly informative and timely discussion, I'm sure. Today's session is actually the first in a series of 4 webinars we're doing around the IOCTA, the Internet Organized Crime Threat Assessment, and about the broader cybercrime landscape. So if today's discussion sparks your interest, there is plenty of more to come. Today's topic is how cybercrime enablers are facilitating crime. It sits at the heart of some of the most pressing challenges in law enforcement today. Cybercrime doesn't just happen in a vacuum, and behind every cyber attack, there is a whole ecosystem of tools, of services, and actors that make it possible. So understanding that ecosystem is the key to disrupting it, and that is exactly what we're here to explore today. We have 2 excellent experts joining us today. First, we have Edvardas Šileris. He's the head of the European Cybercrime Center here at Europol, and he will be presenting the latest findings from the IOCTA, providing a unique look at the current cybercrime landscape across Europe and beyond. And following that, we'll hear from Marijn Schuurbiers. He's the head of operations at the European Cybercrime Center, and he's going to take us on a deep expert dive into the mechanics of cybercrime enablement. So the infrastructures, the services, and the actors that keep this criminal ecosystem running. After both presentations, we're going to have a short Q&A session. And with that, let's get started. The floor is yours, Edvardas.
Thank you very much, Sir Charlotte. So let's go back to Internet Organized Crime Threat Assessment, as we call it IOCTA. So it's version 2026, and we started in 2014. It was first one. So what we are doing with this report, actually, it's our flagship report of European Cybercrime Center, where we present all our findings and new discoveries, what we find during the year, and novelties what criminals are using from perspective of law enforcement, private sector, academia. So from everyone, we collect data with whom we operate. Maybe before jumping directly to report, I would like to briefly explain what we are and what we are doing. So we are European Cybercrime Center, and we are part of Europol, EU Agency for Law Enforcement Cooperation. We don't investigate crimes by ourselves only, so we support our member states and operational partners. And generally, mandate of Europol is 2 and more countries of EU involved. So we should have international aspect, and then we can provide all our tools and services for disposal of countries. So in this case, actually, we have Marijn, who is head of operations, and he coordinates our investigations and tries to do his best to be as efficient as possible. What is interesting also to say is that during years, cybercrime evolved, but core pillars remain same. So it's a bit interesting. If you go back in 2013-14, you will see that still ransomware is the main threat as from cyber. You will see child sexual abuse. You will see online frauds. But everything year by year is more and more sophisticated, more and more automated. We have ChatGPT when it was came almost from nowhere, and right now everyone is using large language models become not reality, but actually it's part of. So I'm not saying about these frontier models, but actually criminals learn from it as well. They start to abuse legal ones, legitimate ones, and also open source. They try to tune based on their needs. Key themes of 2025. So why we are busy and what makes me not sleep very well during the night, if I can make in this way. Actually, that obfuscation methods are becoming more and more sophisticated. So it means that actually encrypted communications are used on daily basis. So I would say if you dive deep to criminal conversations, criminal infrastructure, you will see that 99% of everything is encrypted. In the past, we had cases as KICC, EncroChat, etc., where we saw criminal services for criminals. Right now, we see more and more traditional, well-known services abused by criminals. So you cannot separate that actually it's legitimate stream, is criminal one. So criminals learned as well this lesson that actually it's much better to use publicly available ones and to hide between legitimate interests of society. And it limits law enforcement because we are not challenging needs of encryption is needed very much, and actually it's a legitimate way how to maintain privacy and prevent illegal interventions. But for sure, law enforcement, we need to address this threat somehow, and we should be able to arrest criminals in many cases. Hidden infrastructure and also a bit elephant in the room, jurisdiction. So it means that actually criminals try to set their own criminal infrastructure in different jurisdictions, in different areas, try to hide as much as possible. And also it makes our investigative efforts much more complicated. Third thing, actually, it's using of cryptocurrencies. It's digital, it's nice to have, it's very transparent, it's globally available, but mainly without regulation, and especially those used by criminals. I intentionally will not name in order not to advertise what they are using, but in fact, actually, it's makes our life and our intentions much, much more complicated. Also ransomware involved during the years. From traditional one family approach, actually right now is multi-families, and they are not afraid of rebranding. So even to cluster them in different areas is much more complicated for law enforcement. In the past, it was very simple, relatively simple, of course, approach that to attack, to encrypt data, and then to demand ransom. Right now, actually, it's about exfiltration. Sometimes they are not encrypting data, they are just try to blackmail legitimate business or person and to victimize them as many times as possible. And also, is for sure it involved to crime as a service business model. So it's as we have legitimate services in wide internet available, same for criminals. If you want to mimic or to replicate some legitimate, or you don't have enough competence how to address, how to create, how to code, how to create malware, you just can simply outsource it from crime as a service platforms. Industrialization of online frauds is also a bit interesting because if you measure purely by losses, you will see that online frauds are generating much more losses compared to all the other forms of cybercrime. But of course, they are less dangerous because actually, if you compare ransomware and, for example, if hospital is attacked, actually it can link to deaths, it can link to inability to provide critical services. With financial losses, you see mainly individual by individual. Of course, sometimes attacked industry subjects and, for example, companies, etc. But volume-wise, it's huge, and AI helped a lot to accelerate this. So, for example, we didn't see this skyrocketing in the past, but right now it's more and more common. And artificial intelligence fostered ability to pretend to be native speaker, to correct all the grammar mistakes. And for example, in the past, it was relatively easy way to detect that it's a phishing email because grammar was not correct. And especially in different languages than English, right now it's not so complicated. Monetization of child sexual abuse is also with ability to use AI. You can create new videos, fake videos, deep fakes, and also you can generate a lot of profits from this. Also, not all the legal bases are properly adjusted. So that's why criminals are abusing this way. Role of AI in cybercrime, it's increased efficiency. It's no doubt about that, because what took for you, for example, 1 day for criminal, right now maybe it's a few seconds, and actually it can scale to enormous scale and enormous speed. And as I said in the beginning, usually they are using legitimate AI models, and they just try to jailbreak them, or for example to use open source and to fine tune based on their need. Increased automatization, so far we don't see crime committed purely by AI itself. It's some kind of human assistant still, so it means that actually many things are faster, they are more automated, but still main decision maker is still human. We are afraid, and probably it's time to prepare for that probably in the end of this year, or for sure in next year, we will see skyrocketed crimes committed by AI purely without human intervention. Probably just final cash out will be done by human or something else. But increased automatization is a real headache, and that's why cybercrime is a really dangerous phenomenon, because you can scale. So in the past, for example, in the physical world, if you want to commit, I don't know, robbery or theft or something, you are still limited to time, and you cannot do more than 5-10 thefts per day or something else. Here you can easily send 1 million phishing emails, and if even success rate is 0.1%, you will still have 10,000 victims with real credentials and with ability to hack IT systems. And just to underline from my side, almost last thing, this misuse of legitimate AI tools. Each day with prompt injections, with different means how to overcome safeguards in legitimate tools, criminals are trying to leverage it. And this traditional subscription is 20 euros USD, so more or less similar amount per month. And you have a really, really powerful assistant which knows a lot, which in fact can do many things, can code, can create malware and all these things, if you know how to overcome all the protection. So it's scary, but we as law enforcement, we must be prepared for that. We invest a lot how to mitigate all these risks, and I think that we are quite successful there. With this, I will give pointer to Marijn, and he will dive a bit deeper to enablers. So Marijn, please.
Thanks for the floor, Edvardas. Yes, indeed. So as was mentioned, my name is Marijn Schuurbiers, the head of operations. And at the EC3 operations and law enforcement in general, we are expected to do something about it. If suddenly we have victims, they come to the police and they say, "Help us, please solve these crimes." But this is not so easy, and one of the reasons is because of the cybercrime enablers. And this is also what in IOCTA was zoomed into to give the public a better understanding of this. Well, to take you a little bit into this very quite a complex topic, I will try to do my best to explain. And why is it? What is the reason that it's so complex? Basically, because it is a hybrid ecosystem of anonymity, as we would call them. And there is a whole diversity of cyber criminal enablers in this landscape. So first, you have to understand that the criminals out there, they will use whatever they can use to hide their and to hide themselves and to stay anonymous. They use clear web platforms for it, and they also use dark web platforms for that. Everybody knows nowadays that a lot of applications, they come with end-to-end encryption by default, and this of course sounds nice from a privacy perspective. If you, but the problem is that criminals will take advantage of this end-to-end encryption as well. And as end-to-end encryption, as the word says, it's very hard if you intercept it at any point in the chain to make any sense of it. And the cyber criminals for sure use this, which poses already a problem when it comes to just the clear web platforms. But then on top of all of these end-to-end encryption services, there are a whole range of other enablers out there, which are basically ingredients that the cyber criminals will use within their attacks. So to name a few, which are also outlined further in the IOCTA. So one of them are bulletproof hosting services. Well, you have to imagine that bulletproof hosting services are services in the landscape where criminal can host their data. That's similar to what you would do if you would host your own website, or as a company you have your website of your data infrastructure, you go to a hosting provider. Well, basically these are similar hosting providers, yet they advertise on cyber criminal forums, and they will actually advertise that they accept cryptocurrencies by default. If law enforcement will come, they will not cooperate. They will protect your anonymity and basically make you, or claim at least that they claim to make it bulletproof. And that makes it for us harder, of course, to either identify them or to take down their infrastructures, as these bulletproof hosting companies, their whole business model is not to cooperate. And then there's a whole range of additional anonymization methods. Of course, we already mentioned the dark web. If you look at so the Tor network, it is already the routing on the Tor network is very complex. You cannot see where the traffic is come from or where it is going through, and for sure, of course, this was once probably found with good intentions. It's mainly used by criminal activity, and makes it harder for us to basically identify them or to take these criminals out of business. Of course, you can imagine then, and then there's also, for instance, VPN services. Again, VPN services at themselves are not a bad thing; they are a good thing. But there are certain VPN providers that target the criminal market, charge a little bit more, but then we'll say, okay, we'll provide multi layers of protection, and when law enforcement comes, we will not cooperate again. You could say that when it comes to Tor nodes or VPN nodes, that banks, other companies, they can protect themselves a little bit to it, because you can see where that at least the origin where this traffic was coming from was either the Tor network as or maybe a criminal VPN network, which could act as a red flag, and they could maybe do some mitigation on that. But the cyber criminals, they are creative. So what we are seeing now also for upcoming is the use of residential proxies. Also, again, a complicated term. What you have to imagine of residential proxies, these are hacked home devices, so home routers or home computers, and they are basically being offered for sale to use as a proxy to criminals. And what then happens that with that, criminals, they blend into normal traffic. So it just looks like just a normal home IP address, which doesn't have a red flag at all. And it's also hard to block, because if you would block those, you would block in the traffic of innocent victims that mostly are not even aware that they are misused in this residential proxy network. So you can imagine. And then, of course, there's also the phenomenon that cyber criminals will host their own infrastructure at hidden locations, at their homes, or or maybe also in jurisdictions where we cannot get to them. And as you then can imagine, this total landscape of this hybrid ecosystem of anonymity, gives law enforcement a hard job, basically to find the criminals and to block the attacks. So this is one side of the enablers of cybercrime, the hosting structures, as we have summarized it all together. But there's a second one as well, which is basically the cryptocurrency schemes. And you might think, okay, cryptocurrency schemes, cryptocurrencies are not particularly new, also not in the criminal landscape. Unfortunately, indeed, it is the same as the other protection measures. They are all invented with good intentions, but criminals, they will use it immediately to their advantage. And this ecosystem of crypto schemes also keeps evolving over time. There are various things that you could say about it. So one of it is the diversification of channels. So you have nowadays privacy coins that deliberately target, basically enable to hide your tracks, to hide the criminals' tracks, to hide the transactions, and which makes it harder to seize the cryptocurrencies, to identify who is behind them. Also, they broaden their target pool, and what we mean by that is that they also use other people in the landscape, often maybe relatively innocent people or people that don't know exactly what they are doing, but they are used as money mules, basically to cash out the money on behalf of these criminals. On top of that, of course, because we can track certain types of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin pretty well, and the criminals they realize that, and what they do for that, the services appear in the criminal landscape, which are called mixing services. So they obfuscate the Bitcoin trail even more. So there goes a lot of cryptocurrency transactions go in. They are tumbled like in a washing machine, and then they come out on the other side. And as you cannot see exactly what is in there, you cannot trace the incoming from the outgoing anymore, which is exactly what the criminals want to hide themselves. Then in the end, they if it's already not complicated enough, they also integrate the money streams with regular funds. So the cash out through legitimate service to specific cryptocurrency credit cards, money mules, as I mentioned, with normal bank accounts, which also adds an additional layer of complexity for law enforcement to basically solve your cases. But of course, in the end, what we always try to emphasize, we don't do this for ourselves. We in the end do this to serve the general public. I mentioned basically two categories of cybercrime enablers. And there are even more, but there is also light at the end of the tunnel. Of course, when it comes to our strategies, we deliberately also focus on these cyber criminal enablers. I mentioned, for instance, VPN services, and especially then the criminal VPN services. Just last week, we had a big intervention on First VPN, which was also, we can also read in our press release, where we did an investigation to exactly such a facilitator to basically turn the table around, and just if you compare it to EncroChat in the drug landscape, this was a crime enabler for drugs, but which is a problem. But you can also use it as a law enforcement to your advantage, and then to take them as a target. So we did this with First VPN. Also, recently we did this with the SOX escort service, which was a residential proxy network, which had a network of home computers, which also this service we took down. As I mentioned, there are various, when we're looking ahead, various measures that we can take additionally to our advantage, or at least to reduce crime, maybe from a regulative perspective. And this can be done on various items within the landscape, also extensively written down in the IOCTA. To name a few categories, so when we look at the DNS abuse, for those that don't know, the DNS is the domain name system, a core system of the internet that routes traffic, that connects domain names to IP addresses. Obviously, is there for a very, very good reason. We all use it every day, but criminals also do it and abuse it. And through certain regulative measures, it can be made harder to abuse it for criminal purposes. When we talk about fraud, fraud is when you count by the numbers and the amount of losses on the cybercriminal landscape is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, and that can also benefit from various items. One of it is that we have to have a multi-stakeholder approach, so public-private partnerships, share information on ongoing frauds as soon as possible between law enforcement agencies, between private entities and all of them, in order to somehow mitigate these threats in real time. So as soon as certain scams pop up, share this information as soon as possible and try to block it with anybody who has the right cards at that moment. Another interesting phenomenon is the frauds through SIM cards, and this happens at scale. I can imagine that everybody in the audience have received for the past year has received a fake SMS claiming that your package is about to arrive, or that you did not pay your taxes, and you are trying to be lured into clicking on a link. Well, this does not come just from one person behind a mobile phone, but there are criminal services out there with hundreds of thousands of SIM cards, basically spreading these phishing, or actually smishing, as we then call it, SMSs throughout the landscape. These do not come from one SIM card, because that would be easy to block for telecom providers. But there are criminals out there that do it by bulk. They have a service center full of hundreds of thousands of SIM cards, all being operated in parallel, spreading these phishing SMSs as a service. Well, you can do something about it. Because you can imagine if the sales of such, especially the bulk purchases of such SIMs, would be restricted, and the identity checks would be strengthened, that would be of great value. Well, other regulative approaches you can also imagine, for instance, when we are talking about digital finance, we talked about earlier about cryptocurrencies. Well, if we internationally align the regulations on that, if we require better know your customer checks, also at neobanks and at decentralized finance operators, we can also together make the life of criminals harder. And then as the last point, Edvardas earlier mentioned that the criminals are have started to use AI technologies, and as IOCTA mentioned, we expect that to grow big time. Well, how to fight AI? We would say with AI. So law enforcement should be enabled to deploy AI within their investigations. Of course, you can imagine the data sets that we come across in these investigations are becoming bigger and bigger, and we definitely need AI to go through them. Of course, there are various regulations for that, so and we will always comply with those regulations. When regulations are developed for also in the future, because they will be continuously changed, we should keep in mind to enable law enforcement agencies to use AI, both for Europol, but also for law enforcement agencies across the EU. I think this brings it to the end of my part, at least when it comes to the cyber enablers and looking a little bit ahead. So I give the floor back to you.
Thank you both, Edvardas and Marijn. Those were really insightful presentations. It's clear that the cybercrime landscape is both complex and really fast evolving. And I think you've given our audience quite some bit to think about. We're now going to move into the Q&A session. We have around 20 minutes, so let's make the most of it. Let's see. I already have a few questions lined up. So we actually had several questions on coordination and collaboration. So this first one is for you, Edvardas. What collaborative efforts are needed between international law enforcement agencies to effectively combat cybercrime?
Good question. Don't know who asks this. Actually, if it's law enforcement, so probably they know. But if it's not from general public or society, then probably I need to explain. In fact, actually, I don't know probably significant, it's almost known cases which are purely national ones. So that's why actually in cyber, more or less everything is international. So for example, either you abuse some service, either you have some server outside your jurisdiction. That's why actually law enforcement needs to learn completely new way how to tackle this. So common legislation is needed, more or less same standards and norm and speed. Because in traditional matters you can wait. In digital, in few seconds or sometimes in few hours, it will disappear. So that's why law enforcement should be extremely fast and efficient to have proper channels how to exchange information, not only for knowledge, but that they should be acceptable in court as evidence in the end of the day, because our core business is to arrest, to dismantle, and then to prosecute in the end of the day. So that's why completely new approach is needed, and maybe a bit different procedures compare which we have today. So I think that we are frontier entities, cyber, if I could name us as this, actually cybercrime investigators, because it's our daily job and it's not exception, is what we are doing on daily basis. And that's why actually entities as Europol is a crucial component of it and crucial component of success, because it makes life much easier for law enforcement. Here in building at Europol, we have representatives from 54, if I'm not mistaken, countries. On daily basis, we have joint JCAT, so-called, so Joint Cybercrime Action Task Force, where we have liaison officers for cyber purposes on daily basis who works and coordinate cases and try to exchange information in matters of seconds, sometimes or minutes.
Thank you. Next, I have a question for both of you, actually. Do you agree that the scale of online fraud creates systemic risks, boosting organized crime groups while eroding trust in financial markets and institutions?
It's for sure, it's a fact of life that the scale of at which for online frauds are happening and keep on increasing is a severe problem. And when we combine it with the IOCTA findings on the adoption of AI within this fraud landscape, we expect this only to become more and more. You can imagine, and just to name it as an example, is a certain type of fraud which is quite well known is that through WhatsApp, a message is sent to maybe a parent saying, "Hey, this is your son. My phone is broken. Please send me some money." Well, of course, like maybe 90% of the people will not buy it, 95 maybe, but there will be 5% will actually buy it and they lost money with it because it's a text message, the number does not match up, etc. But as you can imagine, when AI will pick up, and this will not be just a text message, but it will be your son in a video with your son's voice, which is somehow with generative AI, and it looks so realistic that can become the likeliness of falling for such a trap will increase heavily. Of course, in the beginning, it will take time before this will become mainstream. But what we have seen over the past years, everything that you imagine today will happen tomorrow. So this is going to pose a problem for sure. And also with that, the trust, as was in the question, in the landscape as a whole. What can you trust? Can you trust Facebook or any other platform when when they are actually when an advertisement pops up actually from a criminal? Can you trust a WhatsApp message coming from your boss, because maybe it's not your boss? This is for sure a problem we foresee.
And just to add, the last figure which I heard actually is quite well known, is that losses from cybercrime, global ones, it's not only Europeans, is 10 trillions annually. So global economy is 120, 130 trillion. So you can imagine amount of losses, and for sure it poses systemic risks because you can scale. As I said in the previous statements, that actually you can simultaneously approach millions of possible victims. And if you are successful, impact is enormous, and mainly because it's from outside, not from inside. And there is no, so far, real efficient tools how to mitigate. We as law enforcement, we are very successful in our investigations, but if you want to approach it systematically, private sector should be involved. For example, filtering of some messages, telecoms, and we have some nice examples where they're able to filter it as a spam in traditional mailing services, 90-95% of everything, and then it's prevention. So if you are able to mitigate before attack happens, you are successful. But it's completely different approach from traditional ones. It's not just only awareness. You need to have so-called hard measures how to mitigate this. And there are ways, but it's not too easy.
Thank you. Now that you've mentioned AI and the misuse of AI, we have a couple of questions on that topic. So let's dive into those. Edvardas, this one is for you. The misuse of AI by criminals seems to be a growing problem. What exactly is Europol doing with private companies to prevent this?
With private companies, we're trying to collect all the ways how it's been abused. We share our insights, what we saw from our criminal investigations and from intelligence. At Europol, we have permanent advisory groups to Cybercrime Center where leading companies share their insights and experience. Because what is different between digital world and physical, in digital we don't have public spaces, and the physical one, its majority belongs to governments and to general society. In digital, more or less everything is owned by private entities, and that's why we don't have full visibility what is going on. The platform in social media, it's moderated by owner of this media, so that's why we as law enforcement, we should be constantly incorporated and involved, and that's why we need to guide and share our experience, and we are doing this with private companies who create these models. But ball is in their side, because actually we are not creators of these models, but we see how criminals are abusing this. So that's why closer cooperation is needed, and I think that we are quite successful in this.
So following up on what you just mentioned, what can private sector professionals and private organizations do to play their part? How can they collaborate with EC3?
As I said, we have advisory groups. We just had a really nice, successful pilot of cyber intelligence extension program. So when we invite trusted private partners, and they share their own know-how, their intelligence, what do they have in their own databases? Because, as I said, they have enormous visibility compared sometimes to government entities. So they should approach us. We would be more than happy to engage. And if they have some insights how to do it, or for example how we can scale, especially I like to mention that keyword is scalability, because we are looking for solutions how we can influence millions of victims, and how we can prevent them to become victims. So in this case, it's not about how to solve one case only. It's how to approach this threat systematically.
Marijn, this next one is for you. And still on the topic of AI. So in the AI versus AI battle, how do you see AI in threat intelligence platforms, and what capabilities would help you battle current AI threats?
All right. Wow. That's quite an interesting topic. Well, when we look at threat intelligence, like a lot is being of this threat intelligence is being gathered by private companies, private companies that we cooperate quite good with, indeed, like Edvardas mentioned, through the advisory groups or the Cyber Intelligence Ascension program. And also with these companies, we do not only talk to them or have a coffee with them, we actually ask them to provide us with actionable intelligence, with intelligence that actually what we can follow up on by taking down an attack infrastructure or arrest criminals. But you can imagine that if we would just ask these companies, okay, give us all your threat intelligence that you have, they could easily bury us with it, and we would suffocate or drown in it. So the answer is that because these private companies, they use this threat intelligence mainly, that's the primary focus, to protect networks. So they filter out specific elements of this threat intelligence to protect networks, to configure firewalls and intrusion detection systems. We are looking for other indicators in those same data sets, the actionable intelligence, but how to get it out of there? Again, this requires big data analysis and artificial intelligence to connect this data. And this can be done in two ways. First, the filtering should be done as much as possible on the side of the private companies, again, so that they don't overload us with information of all kinds of types. No, we only want the specific criminal data. That's also the only data that we can store as Europol. And so they will have to probably use AI for that. And then on our side, if we have such a subset of threat intelligence, we want to connect it to ongoing criminal cases of the European member states and the third-party countries that are associated with Europol. Again, that will still be huge volumes of data, which for sure we would need AI to leverage that better. Because we can do like a small cross match. Hey, we have a cross match of an IP address with one, but you have to imagine that still this has to be done at scale. That you can identify cross matches and cross links that you cannot do manually, or it would take you forever to do this. So we would, on the law enforcement side, would need AI tooling for that as well.
Thank you. Let's now move to a different topic. Let's talk about dark web. We have a couple of questions on those. This first one is for both of you. How does the dark web enable the exploitation of legitimate business infrastructures such as E2E platforms, financial and hosting services, etc.?
I don't know. Technology itself, it was neutral. Actually, its industry likes to underline this, and actually, in fact, it's true. Dark web was, or such kind of technology was created for good purpose to protect freedom of speech, but right now it's mainly abused by criminals. But of course, in many cases, they do mistakes, so that's why we are successful. And theoretical level, we shouldn't be, but because of that, so it's more or less actually area or underground wall, and you can act without any limitations and more or less be sure that actually you are protected. So that's why actually it's really dangerous and it's really hard to investigate. Maybe Marijn, you'd.
Yeah, no, I agree with your with your vision, and yeah, somehow the whole indeed security versus privacy discussions on the internet took took its like a direction of its own. If we can compare it to the analog world, every car in Europe has a license plate, and it's and it is there for a reason, because you can imagine if nobody would neither a license plate mandatory, then controlling traffic, speeding, or running red lights, that would become a huge problem. And nobody actually will oppose that, and everybody think that's okay. Somehow on the internet, there became a sort of a narrative that everything should be anonymous to be safe. But actually, the opposite is true, because the anonymization is mainly abused by the criminals, and not so much about the regular civilians like you and me. When I am on the internet, maybe I can use a VPN, but then a legitimate one, of course. But I don't need to hide my IP address per se. But somehow, well, on the internet, this has become a discussion on its own, which makes life for law enforcement hard. And in the end, law enforcement is there not for ourselves, but we are here to serve the public and actually to protect the privacy of the civilians. So, and the dark web and other enablers, as we hear today, they provide this anonymity that is unfortunately heavily abused by criminals.
On the same topic as well, what steps can individuals take to protect themselves from potential threats originating from the dark web?
Uh-huh. All right. Well, from the dark web itself, I would make it more generally. Sometimes, indeed, over time, there are some golden rules which have already been in place for quite some years, and they are still very valid. So, if we would look at basic security rules, that you always make sure that your computer software is up to date, so that all of the latest holes that might be in there are being patched by the companies who provided that software, that your antivirus is updated with the latest version, because you can imagine that thousands of new malwares get created every single day. And then, of course, also a very important one is the multi-factor authentication. So don't just only rely on a username password, because if they get stolen also every day, that has become a business model in the cybercriminal landscape. And there's a very big chance that at some point your username password combination will be stolen. But if you have an additional factor, so that can be via SMS authentication or by some other authenticator mechanism, which are basically out there for free to use, that is a definite must do. And this works already, because criminals, they are also lazy. If they encounter a system with multi-factor authentication, we even saw it with ransomware attacks, when they approach systems, and as soon as they encounter that, they will go to the next victim, because they have a whole list of victims they can approach. Just also, again, compare it with the analog world. Make sure you have a good lock on your home, and the criminals will not per se disappear with that, but they will go to the next one, and unfortunately go to the house with the weakest lock.
But just to answer straightly this question, actually, how to mitigate risk from dark web, actually, don't use dark web. It's simple as that, because actually it will not attack you. Actually, its area is similar to, for example, in each city, there are nice areas to visit and not so nice, not so safe. So by default, dark web is not safe area to be. So I don't see many legitimate use cases why we should go there, and regular citizens. So don't try to download free software or correct software, because then probably with that you will get malware, and you will be you will appear as a victim at one day. So it's the easiest way. So
Yeah. Thank you both. The next question is for you, Edvardas. How have cryptocurrencies evolved as a facilitator of cybercrime?
sometimes I'm joking that actually without cryptocurrencies we barely would have cybercrime, or at least very little of it, because in cyber, when data became commodity, actually everyone realized that in this 21st century, data is everything, and is the most valuable currency for time being. So if someone is able to steal data and they want to trade this data, so if you go to traditional banking system, so probably it will be not so big challenge for us to arrest, and that's why you switch to cryptocurrencies. So think which was invented as the most transparent thing, because in traditional banking you don't see amounts, you don't see how much money do I have, etc. In crypto, everything is publicly visible except name. So it should be really easy to trace between different accounts, but in fact it's not. What Marijn explained with all these mixers and fake transactions, you mix things and actually you create anonymity. So if we see evolution of cybercrime from first ransomware demand of 50 USD or 20 USD, it appears right now 20 millions, 50 millions per once, and actually everything is used in crypto. So I haven't seen any ransomware demand in gold or is in any physical means. Everything is digital. So I don't want to say that crypto is illegal or it's used only for criminal purposes. Not at all. It's a very small percentage of everything, but it creates a lot of headache for us.
Thank you,
Yep.
Edvardas.
Yeah, and it's certainly, indeed, I totally agree. Some are unfortunately cryptocurrency, especially in the ransomware landscape, but nowadays even also in the child abuse landscape, that will be explained in one of the later episodes of the IOCTA podcast. Well, that also now child sexual abuse material becomes monetized. And why is it becoming available to be monetized? Because of cryptocurrencies. Because if you would have to do that through the usual bank account system, that would be traceable. Banks we can order transactions from there. The anonymity is not so easy when it comes to the traditional financial system. Unfortunately, this is with Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. This is not the case, which for sure acted as I would say, elixir to various forms of cybercrime.
It's a bit of a technical question. This one's for you, Marijn. Could you talk more about what you mean with 24-hour mitigation standard?
Wow, yeah, indeed, it is a broader philosophy. It's probably hard to explain it in a very short matter of time. But as nowadays, also the new payment system, so also already the cryptocurrency transactions can be very fast, but also the new payment systems of well, if you would call it the traditional banking systems, they are also evolving. They are making transactions going cross-border nowadays super fast. Nationally, you can already 1 second later the money will be there. This will also be the case across Europe, and probably also for transactions outside of Europe that will also only enhance more. In order to, when crime is happening and you want to block these funds, because of course they will be transferred and they will be transferred again and again, in the end to find a cash out point or an anonymity point. Well, you need to somehow share this information about such illicit transactions as soon as possible. These illicit transactions, they are connected to crimes, for instance, to scams or to other points, and the sooner we can share this information across these partners, the sooner they can block it. Well, this would require some sort of automation, open standards, so not that you have to call the next morning to, hey, there's a transaction. No, this should be somehow also offer a similar scale that unfortunately the cybercriminal are using against society, that we should come to solutions that offer that similar kind of skill, but then for society to mitigate those transactions, for instance, and the details around it faster with each other.
Okay. Thank you for that detailed answer. This brings us to the end of today's session. Unfortunately, we don't have time to answer more questions, but I want to give a huge thanks to both of you, to Edvardas and to Marijn, for being here. You've heard all about the rapidly evolving cybercrime landscape as highlighted in our annual Internet Organized Crime Threat Assessment Report. If you would like to know more about the key cyber threats affecting the EU, including child sexual abuse material, ransomware, and online fraud schemes, you can listen to all the episodes of this season on whichever platform you use. And if you liked the episode, consider giving us a like, subscribing, or sharing the podcast with others. You can find links to the Internet Organized Crime Threat Assessment, or IOCTA report, and the other resources mentioned in the show notes. Thank you very much for listening. We will see you soon.